God bless the great state of Iowa. "119 hours. That's how long we've got. All the noise, all the smoke, all the fireworks, the circus. It has been kind of a circus. 119 hours from now, the Iowa caucuses begin. And I got to say, what we're seeing here today is historic. What we're seeing here today is we're seeing conservatives coming together and uniting. All across this state of Iowa, all across this country. This is something so many of us have dreamed about, have prayed for. Over and over again, Washington has worked to divide us, to pit us against each other, to have us fighting tooth and nail. You look at the patriots we have here today, Matt, and Jason, and Louis, and Governor Rick Perry, and Steve King, and Bob Vanderplatz, and Tony Perkins. What an incredible array of principled, constitutionalist fighters who stand with the American people. You look at people like Jack Zimmerman, who's here with us, a brave, wounded warrior who stood and fought for this country and is standing and fighting to save this country today. Now, why is this happening? Why are conservatives coming together like never before? Because the stakes, the threats to our country have never been greater. Now, tomorrow, we've got a debate. Although one of the candidates has chosen not to attend. Apparently, Mr. Trump considers Megyn Kelly very, very scary. And you know, Donald is a fragile soul. I mean, she might ask a mean question, and who knows what could happen. I mean, his hair could stand on end. You know, I've got to say, it is an amazing statement for a presidential candidate to say, I'm not willing to show up for the debate. This entire process is a job interview. We've spent 7 years with a narcissistic, self-involved president in Washington who thinks the American people work for him, who behaves like an emperor. If he decrees something, it must be so. It has been all about Obama, the chosen one, for 7 years. What does it say if a candidate says, I'm not willing to stand in front of the men and women of Iowa? What does it say when Donald tells the men and women of Iowa, my time is more important than your time? You know, on Monday, we will complete the full Grassley, having gone to all 99 counties in the state of Iowa. Standing in front of the men and women of Iowa and asking for your support, looking you in the eyes and answering the hard questions. That's what any candidate who hopes to win the state of Iowa owes the men and women of this state. This is a job interview. I want you to imagine you put up an ad in the Help Wanted pages looking for a new employee to administer the government and turn the ship of state around. And imagine someone called you and said, you know what, I'd like that job, but I ain't showing up for the interview. What would you say? You're fired. So if Donald finds Megan so terribly frightening, I yesterday suggested an alternative. He and I are the leading candidates in this state right now, so how about the two of us in a one-on-one debate, mano a mano? And I'm going to propose a venue, Western Iowa Tech, Saturday night in Sioux City. We already have it reserved. Eight o'clock Saturday night, a 2-hour one-on-one debate. Now, if gentle Donald cannot handle Megyn Kelly, how about for a moderator instead, Mark Levin? Or if he doesn't like Mark Levin, how about Sean Hannity? And if he doesn't like Sean Hannity, how about Rush Limbaugh? And if gentle Donald is frightened by Mark and Sean and Rush, then we'll have no moderator whatsoever. A town hall of Iowans, and I'll tell you what, Donald, you can invite half the people and control half the tickets. We'll invite half the people and half the tickets, and each of us will alternate asking questions from the men and women of Iowa who are going to vote in the caucus on Monday night. Because at the end of the day, it's not really that Donald is afraid of Megan. It's not that he's afraid of Mark or Sean or Rush. It's not that he's afraid of me. He's afraid of you. He doesn't want to answer questions from the men and women of Iowa about how his record doesn't match what he's selling. I believe for any candidate to have a chance at winning Iowa, you have to demonstrate the humility to stand in front of the people of this state. And I believe for any president to have the right temperament to be an effective president, not an imperial dictator like we've seen for the last 7 years, you have to demonstrate the humility to understand you work for the American people and not the other way around. So we have a venue, we have a time. All we're missing is a candidate. But I have to say, in 119 hours, everyone in this room is going to have an incredibly important decision to make. And you know, all of us are so unbelievably frustrated because we keep winning elections and then losing. We were told if only we had a Republican House of Representatives, then things would be different. Then we were told if only we had a Republican Senate, it's Harry Reid that's the problem, then things would be different. Well, we've had Republican majorities in both houses for over a year now. How's that worked out? Look, the American people feel a profound sense of betrayal. of candidates who say one thing and do another. And we cannot get burned again. The stakes are too high. If we mess it up again, if we listen to the campaign rhetoric again and get fooled again, we can't get burned again. So let me suggest a test that the men and women of Iowa may wish to apply to distinguish the wheat from the chaff, to distinguish who you can trust from who you can't. And it is the test that the Scriptures tell us, you shall know them by their fruits. My advice to everyone here is don't listen to a word that any of the candidates say. Don't listen to what I say. Don't listen to what Donald says. Really, don't listen to what Donald says. Don't listen to what any of the candidates say. Instead, say simply, show me. Show me your record. Show me when you've walked the walk. I had an old boss of mine who used to say, if I'm ever accused of being a Christian, I'd like for there to be enough evidence to convict me. The same is true of being a conservative. If you're really a conservative, you know what? You shouldn't have to tell anybody. Because you will have been in the foxholes. You will bear the stripes from standing and fighting for your values. If Tony Perkins woke up tomorrow and decided he wanted to run for office as an establishment moderate, he couldn't do it. If Bob Vanderplaat suddenly decided he was going to run as an establishment moderate, if Steve King suddenly woke up and said, you know, this amnesty thing looks pretty good, they couldn't do it. Why? Because they have walked the walk. Because they bear the stripes. Because their walk is witness to their testimony. Not their words, but their action and leadership and sacrifice. I'm going to suggest to you 7 battles that we ought to test every one of the candidates on. 7 battles that were, as Reagan said, times for choosing. The first is life. This is a rally for life. We have today announced our national coalition, over 17,000 pro-life activists all over the country standing together with this campaign. The right to life is fundamental. Without life, there is no liberty. Without life, there is no pursuit of happiness. And every human life is a precious gift of God and should be protected from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. Now, every candidate in a Republican primary will tell you they're pro-life. That's what you say in a Republican primary, regardless of the facts. The question we ought to ask is, don't tell me you're pro-life, show me. When have you stood up and fought to defend the right to life? Before I was in the Senate, I was the Solicitor General of Texas, the chief lawyer for the state in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. We led a coalition of states before the U.S. Supreme Court defending the federal ban on partial birth abortions, and we won 5-4. We led another coalition of states before the Supreme Court defending New Hampshire's law on parental notification, and we won unanimously. And Texas, when the state legislature passed a bill defunding Planned Parenthood, a local district court struck down that law. I personally argued the case in the Court of Appeals, and we won unanimously, reinstating the law and defending Planned Parenthood. Now, if you care about the right to life, there is a clear difference among the candidates. Donald Trump today supports taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. As president, on my first day in office, I intend to instruct the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any and all criminal violations. If the right to life matters to you, there is a clear and meaningful difference among the candidates. Let's talk about the second battle, the second time for choosing, and that is marriage and religious liberty. In June of last year, we saw a shameful decision from the United States Supreme Court. 5 unelected judges arrogantly purporting to tear down the marriage laws of all 50 states. Now, when this decision came down, that was a time for choosing. It was a line in the sand where every candidate could decide on which side of the line do they stand. Several of the leading Republican candidates, including both Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, said publicly, this decision is settled, it's the law of the land, we should accept it, surrender, and move on. Look, those are word for word the talking points of Barack Obama. There is something profoundly wrong when Republican presidential candidates are reading Barack Obama's talking points on marriage. My view is fundamentally different. That decision is fundamentally illegitimate. It was lawless. It was judicial activism. It was inconsistent with the Constitution, and it will not stand. If marriage matters to you, and let me point out, the U.S. Supreme Court didn't invent marriage. Marriage preceded the U.S. Supreme Court. It preceded the United States of America. For millennia, marriage has been ordained by God as the union of one man and one woman. And we have seen, connected to this battle on marriage, the battle over religious liberty. Many folks here attended the rally we held for religious liberty several months ago, listening to heroes who stood for their faith and were persecuted by government. For me, religious liberty has been a lifelong passion. I've spent the last 2 decades fighting for religious liberty, defending in Texas the 10 Commandments monument on the state capitol grounds, going to the U.S. Supreme Court and winning 5-4. Defending the words, one nation under God, in the Pledge of Allegiance, going to the U.S. Supreme Court and winning unanimously. And defending over 3 million veterans nationwide, defending the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial, a lone white Latin cross erected to honor the men and women who gave their lives in World War I. Going to the U.S. Supreme Court and winning 5-4. Now, if marriage and religious liberty matter to you, the question you should ask is not what words do you say, but have you walked the walk? When have you ever defended marriage? When have you ever defended religious liberty? When have you stood up and put action to what you claim to believe? And I'll tell you, if we nominate and elect a president who spent the first 60 years of his life supporting partial birth abortion, we should not be surprised when we see the Supreme Court justices that president puts on the Supreme Court. As radical and activist as this current Supreme Court is, we are one justice away from a 5-justice left-wing majority which would tear down the fundamental liberties of this country. If we don't want to get burned again, as we have been over and over and over again, then we can't listen to the campaign rhetoric. We have to ask if we want a president who will defend life, who will defend marriage, who will defend religious liberty. We have to ask, have you walked the walk and do you bear the stripes? A third example, a third time for choosing, was the battle over guns. In the spring of 2013, we remember the tragic shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, where President Obama could have brought us all together. He could have brought Democrats and Republicans together and said, let's go after violent criminals. Let's come down on them like a ton of bricks. Instead, he did what he has done so many times. He tried to divide us, and he said instead, let's go after the constitutional right to keep and bear arms of law-abiding citizens. Now, let me tell you, the Second Amendment is not about hunting. It's not about skeet shooting or target shooting. Those are wonderful things, but that's not why the Second Amendment is in the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment is in the Bill of Rights because if anyone comes into your home and seeks to harm your family and harm your children, we have a God-given right to protect our families and protect our children. Now, Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats launched an assault on the Second Amendment in the spring of 2013. Millions of Americans rose up against it. And I was proud to stand and lead that fight. And when it came time for a vote on the Senate floor, every one of Barack Obama's proposals to undermine the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms was voted down on the Senate floor. Now, in a Republican primary, every Republican candidate will say they support the Second Amendment, unless you are clinically insane. That's the right answer in a Republican primary. The question to ask of the individual standing on that stage is, in the spring of 2013, when the assault was on, when Obama was targeting the Second Amendment, where were you? Where were you? Did you stand up and defend the Second Amendment, or were you nowhere to be found? The fourth battle, the fourth time for choosing, was the battle over Obamacare. Obamacare is the single biggest job killer in this country. Millions of Americans have lost their jobs, have been forced into part-time work, have lost their health insurance, lost their doctors, have seen their premiums skyrocket. In the fall of 2013, millions of Americans rose up against the train wreck, against the disaster that was Obamacare. I was proud to stand and lead that fight for 21 hours standing on the Senate floor. Now, in a Republican primary, everyone's going to say they oppose Obamacare. The question to ask once again is, where were you? When the fight was being fought, where were you? Well, actually, I said everyone would say they oppose Obamacare. But there's actually one candidate on that stage, or actually technically speaking now not on that stage, who doesn't say that. Listen, Donald Trump's position on health care is that he supports Bernie Sanders-style socialized medicine for everyone. With the government, he doesn't think Obamacare goes far enough. He wants to expand it. So we had Hillary Care, then Obamacare, and Trump Care is socialized medicine for every American, the government in charge of you and your doctor, and Washington deciding, do you get that surgery? Do you get that medication? All you have to do is get approval from the government that is now in charge of medicine in this country. Now listen, Donald is entitled to have that view. You might even call that view a New York value. You know, as Donald might observe, both he and Bernie Sanders are native New Yorkers. But if you care about Obamacare, there's a clear difference in opinion. If Donald Trump is elected president, he intends to expand Obamacare and put the government in charge of more of our health care. If I am elected president, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. The fifth battle, the fifth time for choosing, is the battle over the Washington cartel, the cronyism that is bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Now let me say, any candidate who, like Donald, supported Barack Obama's TARP bailout of the big Wall Street banks, any candidate who, like Donald, supported Barack Obama's stimulus plan, and said the only problem was it wasn't big enough, it should have been even bigger. Any candidate who supports that Washington cronyism, we know to an absolute fact, if that candidate became president, he would not stand up to the Washington cartel and end the cronyism. You know, every candidate on that debate stage says they will stand up to Washington. Well, that's great. The natural follow-up question is, when have you ever stood up to Washington? When have you taken on not just Democrats, but leaders in our own party? And you know, when you do so, you get attacked by the Democrats, you get attacked by the media, and you get attacked by a whole lot of Republicans. There is a reason why Steve King and I both need food tasters in the members' dining room. But I'll tell you this, if a candidate has never once stood up to the Washington cartel, stood up to the cronyism, nobody in history has ever grown a backbone after getting to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The sixth battle, the sixth time for choosing, was the battle over amnesty. In 2013, Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid proposed a massive amnesty plan. It wouldn't have secured the border, it wouldn't have kept this country safe, but it would have granted amnesty to 12 million people here illegally. And they got the support of establishment Republicans in Washington. The Rubio-Schumer amnesty bill passed the U.S. Senate with a big margin. And it was headed to the House. And it was going to pass. House Republican leadership, John Boehner, intended to take up the Rubio-Schumer amnesty bill and pass it with the votes of all the Democrats. It was going to be Republican leadership plus all the Democrats overruling about 200 House Republicans. You want to know just how close it was to passing? Ask Steve King, ask Louis Gohmert just how close Republican leadership was to jamming this through with all of the Democrats. Now, that once again was a time for choosing. There are candidates in the Republican race for president who talk about immigration an awful lot. The only question we should ask as voters is, in 2013, when the fight was being waged, where were you? I can tell you, it was about to pass and then a handful of leaders, including Jeff Sessions and including especially Iowa's own, the relentless Steve King, stood and led the fight to defeat it. And I was proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Jeff Sessions and Louis Gohmert and Steve King, and together millions of Americans rose up and said, no, protect the rule of law. No, protect our borders. No, we don't want amnesty. Now, if that had passed in 2013, it would have gone to President Obama's desk, he would have signed it into law, and that battle would have been lost. Anyone who claims today as a presidential candidate they care about amnesty and securing the border, the one question to ask is, where were they in 2013 when the battle was being fought? And the seventh and final time for choosing is the battle over Iran and radical Islamic terrorism. The single greatest national security threat facing this country is the threat of a nuclear Iran. And any candidate who believes we should keep in place this Iranian nuclear deal, wait to see if Iran complies, maybe, as Donald Trump has suggested, go and negotiate it to get a little bit better deal. Anyone who believes that fundamentally does not understand the nature of the Ayatollah Khamenei. If I am elected president on the first day in office, I intend to rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. And the most important determination the people of Iowa are making politically on Monday is which candidate is best prepared to be commander-in-chief, who has the experience, who has the knowledge, who has the temperament, who has the clarity of vision and the strength of resolve to identify our enemy, radical Islamic terrorism, and to do everything necessary to utterly and completely defeat ISIS. Those are 7 battles, 7 times for choosing. That you can assess not what we say, because talk is cheap, but assess of every candidate, what is your record on those 7. And let me say to the men and women here, you know, every 4 years, Iowa is beset by politicians that descend upon this state. It's like a quadrennial infestation of locusts. At this point, we've seen millions in attack ads. We've seen TV ads. We've seen radio ads. We've seen mailer after mailer after mailer. By the way, the mailers make really good kindling in your fireplace. They just light up quick. And here's what Washington wants. Washington wants to divide us. Because there are more conservatives in Iowa and nationally than there are members of the Washington cartel. In 119 hours, this is our time. This is the time for the men and women in this room and all across this state. And if you agree with me that the stakes have never been higher, that we are at the edge of a cliff staring down, that if we keep going this direction, 4 or 8 more years, we risk losing the greatest country in the history of the world, then I want to ask each of you to do 3 things. Number 1, join us. Commit tonight to show up Monday night, to stand for us, to speak for us, and caucus for us, and stand together. Number 2, bring others. I want to ask every one of you to commit to pick up the phone and call your mom. It's actually a good idea to call your mom anyway. Call your sister or your son or your next door neighbor or your college roommate and say, this election matters. It matters to me. It matters to my future, to my family, to my children and grandchildren. I want to ask everyone here to vote for me 10 times. Now look, we're not Democrats. I'm not suggesting voter fraud. But if everyone here gets 9 other people to come out Monday night and caucus for us, you will have voted 10 times. And let me say to some of the younger folks who are here, if you're not yet old enough to vote, if you get 10 people to come out Monday night, you can vote 10 times before you turn 18. This race is not going to be won on television. It's not going to be won from a TV studio in Manhattan or D.C. It is going to be won friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, Iowan to Iowan. Each and every one of you reaching out, and in 119 hours, you have the potential to change the direction not only of the United States of America, but of the entire world. Let me give you an amazing statistic. Do you know that if you define as a Reaganite someone who supported Ronald Reagan in the primary in 1980, do you know that the Republican Party has never once nominated a Reaganite for president since 1984? Every single nominee of the last 40 years opposed Ronald Reagan in the 1980 primary. I'm 45 years old. I have never once had the opportunity in a general election to vote for a principled Reaganite constitutional conservative. The people of Iowa on Monday night can change that for this entire country. And the last thing I would ask each of you to do is pray. Amen. Commit to pray each and every day from now to Election Day to lift this country up in prayer. To spend just 1 minute a day saying, Father God, please continue this awakening. Continue this spirit of revival. Awaken the body of Christ that we might pull back from this abyss. We're here tonight standing on the promises of 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear their prayer from heaven, and forgive their sins, and I will heal their land. One final bit of history that our friends in the mainstream media will never tell you. In January 1981, when Ronald Reagan took the oath of office, his left hand was resting on 2 Chronicles 7:14. The very real and concrete manifestation of that promise from the Word of God. We have seen these challenges before. We have faced the abyss, and the American people came together and we rose up and pulled this country back. We have done it before. And if we stand united, we can do it again. Thank you.